You are listening to the Booktrospective Podcast, a podcast for all types of books. And even though we read all types of books across all different types of genres, we want to give a disclaimer. Many of our books and a lot of our content sometimes is intended for mature audiences. And we don't believe in censorship, but we do want our listeners to have the opportunity to decide if our episode or podcast is good for them. So with that, let's get into the episode. Hey, it's Dominique.
And Keely.
And you are listening to Booktrospective. And this week we are covering The Assassin's Blade. I don't know if it's The Assassin's Blade or if it's just Assassin's Blade. But anyways.
It's the.
Okay. It's official. By Sarah J. Maas. But first, Keely, how's your week been?
My week's been pretty good. Nothing special. But it's been all right. What about yours?
Fine. I was, even though I just told her like 5 things when I got here, I was waiting to tell you this one thing. So my car is in the shop because like the weirdest things started happening. My lights I have auto lights. So like when it gets dark, they come on. But they were like, I was driving and I'm like, are my lights on? And then I actually stopped and looked at it and they would like come on and go right off. They called me today and I already knew. I just knew that whatever this was going to cost a lot because like I Googled it and there was like, everyone was like, yeah, this is happening, but no one was giving answers. And then when I called, he was like, that's weird, never heard of it. And that's the dealership. So he calls me today and he goes, he's like, are you sitting down? He's like, well, it's like about $1,600. Absolutely not. First of all, that car, I only owe like $7,000 on it still. I'm just not paying that. And all it is, he's like, it's just, it's the headlights. He's like, they're HID headlights or something like that. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to call you back. So me and Josh are looking. I can't find a headlights that cost more than $130. And that was only one. For the most part, they're like the 80 range. And they look like they come in a pair of 2. So I'm like, it's really the labor because I looked at the video. It's hard to get the like light out. You have to take like the filter off on one side and some, but still, like I'm not paying you $1,600 for that. That's absolutely insane. Wow. The only reason I even took it there is because they both are doing it at the same time. He said basically like they're getting bad and so they like get too hot and they're just like overpowering the system. $1,600
That's a lot.
For some headlights? Yeah, no. So I'm like, the scamming is just everywhere. Yeah. And I really like them, but no, I can't pay them that, sorry. But anyways, so that's my week. I'm almost done with school for this semester, so haha, yes. Okay, so this is The Assassin's Blade, and I guess we can start with the blurb.
Yes. Celaena Sardothien is her kingdom's most feared assassin. Though she works for the powerful and ruthless Assassin's Guild, Celaena yields to no one and trusts only her fellow killer for hire, Sam. When Celaena's scheming master, Erevan Hommel, dispatches her on missions that take her from remote islands to hostile deserts, she finds herself acting independently of his wishes and questioning her own allegiance. Along the way, she makes friends and enemies alike and discovers that she feels far more for Sam than just friendship. But by defying Erevan's orders, Celaena risks unimaginable punishment, and with Sam by her side, he is in danger too. They will have to risk it all if they hope to escape Erevan's clutches, and if they fail, they'll lose not just a chance at freedom, but their lives. A prequel to Throne of Glass, this collection of 5 novellas offers readers a deeper look into the history of this cunning assassin and her enthralling and deadly world.
Okay. I almost panicked. I forgot I started my notes at work. And I always do them in Google Docs. I'm like at the computer. Oh. And I was like, that starts in the middle of the story. Where's the first half of my notes? Okay. I have them on my phone. But, okay. So, a word to describe this. It's a weird book.
I would say I'm prepared.
It's a weird book. It's not like...
Yeah.
It's different than all the other ones and like... It's not an anthology, but like it's kind of like an anthology.
I have no idea, honestly.
No, yeah. I mean, like, I kind of want to say origin, but it's really not her origin story, but kind of is. Like, it's kind of like, it's kind of like her, this is my villain story. Like, I kind of get that, but it is hard to kind of put a word on it. So I get that. So this is technically a prequel to this series. I've talked about it a few times. So if you're reading this in the order we are reading it as book. I don't know. What did we read? We read Throne of Glass, Air of Fire. This is book 4. We're reading it as book 4. But some people do read this first. And so, like, it's weird because I read it the same way both times. Like, if you're reading this in our order, like, you already know a lot about these characters. There's new characters in here, but, like, you know who she is. You know who Sam is, like, in context. You know who Arabin is. You have an idea about the world and stuff like that. So, you like, it's kind of like, oh, like, that's kind of nice to know, like, interesting. It's nice to, like, kind of, like, connect dots where, like, they're not even, like, explicitly explained, but you know what's going on. And I do feel like it makes it, like, a little more, like, it makes you like her even more if you already didn't like her at this far in. I don't know. Like, I don't know how you're still reading it, but you just love her. And then I guess, like, if you're reading it first, I don't know how you would feel. Like, I don't know if you would keep reading. I mean, I guess, like, I would be intrigued to know, because she ends where she ends. Like, right. I would be intrigued to know what happens after that. But I think this would be hard for me to be interested in, like, going through it.
Right.
Like, all the stories. I don't think I would be interested or I would care. It's hard, like, even, like, being in the middle. Because, like, it's like, okay, I mean, that's nice. But, like... Yeah. You know, it's kind of like, okay. But, so, essentially, like, a brief summary. There are... How many stories? There's several stories. I don't know exactly how many.
5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay, so there's 5 stories of Celaena, and we will refer to her as Celaena because she is Celaena in all of these. And obviously, like, I'm not spoiling anything yet. This is my general summary, but just be warned that I don't mean to if you feel like I spoiled something yet. But Celaena is basically doing a lot of tasks. At this point in her life, she is an assassin. She's in the Assassin's Guild, and she is 17 or 16? 16. She's 16. And so she has, like, several different missions. Like, she goes to Skull's Bay, which is with the pirates. She gets sent to the desert, which is with a different group of assassins. She has, like, her own interactions, like, in Otterland and Rithold, with Arabin, who is, like, over the Assassin's Keep. She's dealing with Sam, who is, like, she's grown up with Sam, and they're kind of, like, enemies, but, like, also co-workers. So, like, they have that kind of energy going on. And then this book ends, which this is not a spoiler because this is how Throne of Glass starts. It ends with her going to Andavir, which is the salt mines and the slave camps that she was in when she was at the beginning of Throne of Glass. So, this is why it is a prequel. That's all I'm pretty much going to say about it. I'm sure there are triggers. There is.
I'm sure there are. Let's see.
I'm sure there's a plethora of triggers.
Definitely death.
Last week we had, like, no triggers, and this week we have probably every trigger.
Let's see. Okay. Alcohol consumption, blood and gore depiction, physical injuries, murder, knife violence, physical assault, imprisonment, blackmail, building collapse, victim blaming, rape mentioned, sexual harassment, death of a parent, hostage situation, fire, adult minor relationship, misogyny, slavery, forced sex work, suicide, poisoning, drowning, fire. Yeah.
Okay. You know, that covers it. So, if you have not read Throne of Glass, any of the books in the series, if you have not read maybe any SJM books, I will caution you there because we are getting ready to spoil it. So this is your notice to pause here and come back later, and I'm going to get started. So we actually open, and each like story is named. So we start, it's the assassin and the pirate lord, and she is in the Assassin's Keep, Celaena, and her and, like, all of Arabin is her, I hate to use that word, but he is their master. They refer to him as, like, their master. He's the master of the Otterland assassins. And so it's her and, like, all of his, like, most trusted assassins, and also, like, him. And it's, like, 4 o'clock in the morning, and they've all been summoned because, like, one of his, like his second in command, Ben, was caught on a mission and killed. And, like, we are introduced to Sam here. We know Sam from the other books, and we know that Sam is dead. So, like, some point between now and then Sam dies. Sam is 17 and she is 16 currently. And Sam is not Celaena's biggest fan because everyone pretty much knows that she is Arabin's favorite. she says, like, okay, well, we need to sneak back into wherever Ben died. At this point, she doesn't know that Ben is dead. So she's like, okay, well, like, we know the rules. Like, if one of us gets caught, we have to poison them so that they don't talk. And everyone's like, oh my God, like, it's Ben. Like, how can you say that? And she looks at Arabin because she knows, you've already done that, haven't you? But she's like, no, like, something else is wrong. She's, like, reading the room. And that's when they find out that Ben is actually dead. And so she's like, well, where is his body? And Sam says, like, we couldn't get it. And she's like, what do you mean? Like, first of all, she's like, why did they send you? She's like, I'm better than you. Why did you get sent? And how could you leave his body? And he's like, well, we didn't want to lead them back to the keep, which is what they refer to, like, where they live. So we couldn't take his body. And Sam tells her, like, you don't run the keep yet, Celaena. Like, not yet. You're not in charge. And she immediately wants to kill Sam. And Arabin warns Sam, like, you would be a fool to try her tonight. Like, don't do it. And he's like, Celaena, calm down. And so she just, like, walks out and she's like, I'm going to get his body. And then we jump to 2 months later. So her and Sam have been sent on a mission to go meet Rolf, which is so hard for me to say. That is, like, why do you want me to say that? Rolf, who is the pirate lord of Skulls Bay. And basically 3 assassins have been killed by pirates, and Rolf needs to pay for that. So her and Sam are not happy to be on this mission together because they don't like each other. And essentially, like, when she is out and about, she wears a mask all the time because they know that Celaena Sardothien is a girl and, like, is Adolin's assassin, but no one knows that she's, like, a 16-year-old beautiful girl. Like, if men found out that they were being killed and outsmarted by this beautiful child, their ego would feel even, like, less than it already does. So no one can know that. So basically, like, she doesn't walk around the house like that. So, like, all of the assassins are, like, sworn to secrecy about that. So she's like they're in Rolf's office. She's like looking around, like going through his stuff because he's late. And Sam's like, sit down, don't touch stuff. Like, he's very like by the book. So he comes in and she's actually surprised. Like, he does not look like Johnny Depp. He looks like, side note, I love Johnny Depp. So there's that. Like, I love Captain Jack Sparrow, but he doesn't look like that. He actually is not like old or dirty. Like, he actually looks pretty decent. And she notices a map on the palm of his hands, which basically the rumor is that Rolf had sold his soul for a map of like all of the world's oceans, and like it shows like its riches and all kinds of stuff on, like, when he puts his hands together, it makes like the full map. So he's like, can you take off your mask? And she's like, few men see me, basically. And she tells him why they're there. And he's like, well, how do you know it was my men? And she's like, well, all of your men have like this tattoo of like a multicolored hand. It's like their symbol, and like, that's how they know. And he's like, he pulls out this like report, and he's like, well, my report shows that it was like 3 a.m. in the middle of the week, like a Wednesday, and like all these things. Like, so basically like trying to defend why it wasn't them. So Celaena gives him this sealed letter from Arabin, and apparently, like, he reads the letter and he's like, he laughs. He's like, Arabin doesn't even care about his men getting killed. Arabin just wants money, and he's not even demanding any like retribution about the slaves. And Sam like kind of smirked, and she's like, okay, like, am I the only idiot here? Like, what's up? And Rolf says, well, the slaves will be here in a few days. And she's disgusted because she's like, slaves? Like, Arabin's buying slaves? We don't deal in slaves. And she's like, I'm going to make Sam regret this when we get out of here. So apparently, like, slaving is like a new thing. Like, there have only been like transporting slaves the last 2 years in this country. Most of them come from Ilwe, which we know because that's where Nehemia was from. And they're sent to Andavir or Caliculla. And Rolf says that, he'll get the rooms made up for them, a room for each of them. And she's like, well, we only need 1 room. And he's like, oh, really? And she's like, 2 beds. Make sure there's 2 beds in there. So they go in the room, and she's like stuffing the windows and all the cracks and stuff to make sure it's secure. And Sam immediately is like, I had no idea. Like, I was just saving face or whatever. Don't attack me. And she wonders if Rolf lied about what was in the letter, but Sam doesn't think so. And she's like looking at this room. She's like, this room is disgusting. And one thing I love about Celaena is that, like, no matter what it is, like, she is hoity-toity. Like, she is a lady of class. And she's like, this is beneath me. Like, why am I staying here? And she can't believe that Arabin is dealing with slaves. Like, we are better than that. We do not have to deal in slaves. And so she assumed that Arabin was like just like endlessly rich because he has pretty much spent a ton of money on her entire life, buying her like the nicest gowns and all this kind of stuff. But she does have to now pay him back for that, which she wasn't aware of that like growing up. But basically now she has to pay him back. So they go to dinner that night with Rolf, but she can't even eat because she has to wear the mask everywhere she goes. So she's just sitting there, sweating to death because it's hot and dying of hunger because she can't take her mask off. And Rolf asks Sam, have you seen her without the mask on? And he says yes. And he's like, ugh, like trying to act like he's disgusted by her. And Rolf shows her the map of on his palms, and he says the map hasn't moved in 8 years. So basically, this map is tied to magic too. So even though he has the map, it doesn't work because we know that the King of Otterland got rid of all the magic. And she basically says, so that's how you got to the top so easily. And he asks, like, are you really arrogant, or are you just pretending to be because you're really scared, basically? And she's like, I'm the world's greatest assassin. I'm not afraid of anyone. And he says, I'm the world's greatest pirate, and I'm scared of many. And he tells her, like, basically, I killed my way to the top. And he warns her, like, you know, you should watch your back. And he's, like, basically kind of insinuating, like, Sam could, like, come after you. Like, he probably wants to be at the top, too. And so that night, Sam is like, you know, I kind of like Rolf. And he says, like, you know, I'm not going to kill you now, but because I wouldn't get away with it or whatever. But then, like, she's, like, quiet. And he goes, Celaena, is it okay for me to go to sleep? And she's like, I'm not going to kill you, like, whatever. Because she can't sleep because she's just thinking about the slaves. And she's like, why of all of the people would he send me here when it has to do with slaves? And she wonders, like, if Ben was alive, like, would he be on her side about this whole thing? And she decides right then and there that I'm not taking these slaves back to Rifthold. So she's got 2 days to figure out what she can do about it. And she knows that Sam won't help her. So she is going to go to Rolf to try to, like, figure out a way out of the deal. And she tells Sam, like, basically, hey, I'm going to go talk to Rolf, have some breakfast waiting for me. And so she goes to talk to Rolf, and she asks him, like, you know, can I get a chance to inspect the slaves first? And he tells her, like, well, yeah, you can come join me on the ship or whatever. That's where they'll be waiting. And he tells her there will be 100 slaves on the ship, and he invites her to come see some other slaves that he already has, like, in the city, like, in a holding place, so she can compare them. So she goes back to eat with Sam, and she pretends, like, she's, like, drinking or tea or something like that, and she's like, is this belladonna that I smell? Like, and, like, pretending like he's trying to poison her. And Sam asks, like, what are you planning with Rolf? And she's like, what do you mean? Like, I'm not planning anything. And he just snaps at her. He's like, we have literally grown up together. Like, I know when you're sneaking around. And she knows if he finds out, he'll ruin the plan for her. Or if Rolf finds out that Sam knows, he will kill Sam. So, like, either way, it's going to go bad. So she pretends like, you know, maybe I'm just interested in Rolf. And Sam says he is 12 years older than you. And then he's like, you know what? And he just opens, like, the curtains in the window. And she's like, what are you doing? And he's like, I'm hot. And if you're interested in Rolf, then there's no reason of you hiding your face up here. And she's like, you are an idiot, and closes the window. And he says, I'm tired of you wearing that cloak and all the drama that comes with it and you ordering me around. And he says, whatever it is, just remember you're not the head of the Assassin's Guild yet. And he, like, grabs her, and she says, if you touch me again, you'll lose your hand. So they go to dinner, and they, like, just eat in silence. And Rolf, like, then takes them both to this holding facility. So they go in there, and it's, like, I mean, it's miserable. It's slaves. There's men, women, children. She counts, like, all the people. And, like, they tell them, like, some of them even died on, like, the journey. And basically, like, we learn, like, the same thing we already know. But, like, Ilwe fought back against Otterland. So, you know, basically, Ilwe has a bunch of riches, though, which is why, like, the king doesn't just, like, destroy them. He wants to get all their valuables out of there, too. So Sam asks, like, how many of these slaves will be considered useful, and Rolf says that, like, whatever ones Arabin doesn't want will be sent to the salt mines, and, like, we try to keep the children together with their parents, but, like, sometimes they get separated from their mothers, sometimes they get sent to brothels, sometimes they get hired to be, like, maidens, and I don't know, all kinds of stuff. And, like, when he says the brothel thing, that really triggers Sam because Sam's mom had been sold to a brothel and grown up as a courtesan, which is basically, like, the high-end sex workers. And then when Sam was 6, she had been killed. And then the reason that Sam ended up with Arabin is because she had been one of Arabin's favorites and had made Arabin promise to raise Sam. So that's how Sam ended up with the assassins. So Celaena just, like, kind of rushes out of there. She can't take it anymore, and Sam follows her, and, like, they end up on the beach, and, like, he just, like, is trying to force her to talk to him, which she won't, so they end up fighting until he can, like, pin her down, and when he finally lets her go, she says, how can you bear to look at them? It makes me so mad, and she tells him that she wants to free them with or without him. And he says, Rolf or Arabin will kill you, and she says, we have a choice, we're not kids anymore. And she says they're innocent. And he says, and we weren't. He says he's not disagreeing, but we're just two people. And Celaena says, we're the best. And I've been getting like basically all of his like information on how Rolf plans on trading them and all that stuff. And Sam says it's reckless. He says, I guess if we're going to die, it should be for a noble cause. And Celaena says, we're not going to die if you follow my plan. So, Sam does think it'll work when she tells him the plan and says maybe we shouldn't return because Erebin will kill us. And Celaena says he'll hunt us. He invested way too much money in us just to let us go. And Sam says, I think there's more here than just this trade. Sam says maybe there's a reason that he needed to get us out of the city for a month because we don't have anything to do with this trade otherwise. And he says we never figured out why Ben was sent on the mission that he was when he got killed. And Celaena says, well, we're not supposed to question Erebin. And Sam says, well, you've never followed orders before. So the next day, they actually see, like, the slaves that are going to Erebin on that ship. And they see, like, where the guards are that are watching the shift. And they learn, like, when the shift changes are and, like, all the details. And they ask if any of the slaves speak their language. And finally, like, one man from Eoway speaks up and says that he does. So later that night, they sneak back onto the boat with rowboats. And they, like... I think Sam goes into one ship or he waits or something like that. And so she goes into the ship, she takes out the guards, and she asks the slaves, like, to send up the guy from earlier, and he comes up there, and she, like, frees him, and, like, his wrists are all scabbed and bleeding, and, like, she just looks how terrible they are. And she tells him that they are freeing them, and he asks, like, who she is, and she just says a friend. And she tells him that the guards are unconscious, and that tomorrow they're supposed to stay on the ship, and that the guards are going to take their boat to, like, away to safety, basically. And she realizes that there are some other ones who do speak their language because immediately, like, as she's telling him this, some of the other ones start translating in other languages besides, like, Ilwe. So they were just probably too afraid to say anything. And she tells them, like, they can, like, move around the room, but do not go up on deck because there are guards watching the ship. And she tells them that her friend Sam is on another boat full of slaves as well. And at dawn, we're going to make a distraction because of basically, like, this, there's only one way in and out of this harbor, this port. And there's, like, this giant chain connected to these towers. And if you're not, like, given permission to leave or come in, you will just crash into this chain and destroy your ship. So they have to, like, create a distraction and get this chain down. But she says, no matter what, at dawn, you need to get your rows out and just start rowing, and we will take care of the rest. And she tells the guy, like the main guy, that he's going to have to take a rowboat over to the other boat so that Sam can also, or so that he can also speak to the slaves. Like, Sam went over there and took out the guards, but obviously they don't know if anybody over there understands him. So he needs to go over there too. So she gets back on the boat with Sam, and he asks if she's nervous, and she says no, and he says me too, and she says get ready to unleash hell. So they go to this, like, tavern with Rolf that night, and Sam just pretends to be getting drunk. So he literally has, like, a bug and somehow drilled a hole in it, and then he, like, so in between, like, the hole, like, in the beer coming out the hole, he's also just, like, sloshing around so that the beer just, like, falls out. So between those two things, he's barely drinking anything. But no one even notices because everybody's so drunk. And it's almost 3:30 in the morning, and she knows that they need to start, like, moving. So she thinks about how she can, how she, like, started this giant tab for the pirates, and she's not paying for all of this. Like, she basically was like, let's have a party, and not gonna pay for it. And so Rolf asks her again, like, can I see your face? And she says, did you really sell your soul for the map on your hands? And he says, if you show me your face, I'll tell you the truth. So they start playing cards, and, like, which leads, like, Rolf, like, people start getting mad. They start fighting about cards, obviously. And so she's like, okay, gotta keep this going. So she jumps in the fight, like, she's tripping people, like, all kinds of stuff is going on. And so then the fight gets, like, good and heavy. So she sneaks out with Sam. And they're like, okay, we have till dawn to take care of the chain and the catapult so that the boats can escape. But as they are leaving, Rolf steps out from the side, and he's, like, going somewhere. So she tries to pretend like, you know, yeah, I didn't want to get in that brawl. And he's like, really? Because I saw you trip somebody in the brawl. So, like, you didn't want to get involved? And he says, you've been wanting a fight for days, and then suddenly when there's a fight, you disappear. And Sam says, like, look, we don't want to fight. And Rolf says, I know you don't, but she does. And she notices out of the corner of her eye that, like, the oars have come out of the ship, like the slaves are getting ready to are ready to go. And she just hopes that Rolf doesn't notice. And Rolf says, I'm going to kill you. But she pulls off her hood because the only distraction that she has is like showing him her face. And he's like baffled. Like, he cannot believe that she's like a 16-year-old girl. And she tells Sam to run. And Rolf says, how dare you deceive me? And she says, I told you I was beautiful. And so Rolf shouts to his people and asks, like, how old are you? And like, he cannot believe she's 16. So they start fighting, and he asks, like, is the plan to, like, steal the slaves for your profit? And she's like, no, like, I want to free them. And he calls her a fool, saying that there's thousands. Is she going to free all of them? And says if he doesn't kill her, then Arobin will. But she, like, knocks him out, and she's able to get away from him. So she catches up with Sam, and he's, like, working on freeing the chain. And the good thing is she had also taken out, like, all the motorized boats the night before. So the pirates only have, like, rowboats, but they are in them and, like, catching up to the ships. And, like, she's too far away, and it looks like the ships are going to crash into the chain, but, like, Sam is working on it. And then she sees a pirate throw a dagger at Sam as he gets the chain free, and then, like, the tower collapses, and she can't see Sam anymore. So the slave ships do make it out, and she, like, starts panicking, thinking that Sam is dead. But before she can even go look for him, Rolf grabs her again, and this time he has a dagger at her neck. And he thinks he has her, but she, like, manages to, like, turn and twist out of it and, like, brace his nose. And she tells him, like, you're going to sign and stamp a letter to Arobin telling him that the deal is over. And if Arobin tries again to buy any slaves, that you're going to bring your whole armada down to punish him. And then you're going to sign another letter, and it's going to say that you, Rolf, will never buy, sell, or trade slaves again. And if you catch any pirates doing it, you will hang, burn, or kill them yourself. And that Skulls Bay is now a haven for slaves. And he's like, why would I do that? And she has a dagger on him, so she's like already pushing the dagger in him, but then she says, fine, I don't need you to sign it because that day when you were late in your office, I memorized your signature and I stole your seal ring. So she has everything that she needs. And she's like, also, I'll just go to town after I kill you and just tell your cronies that you went after the slave ship. So then, like, when you're gone for 6 months to a year, like, no one will even wonder. And then you just died at sea or something. Like, oh, well. And then she says, he's like, well, how do you know I'll keep my word? And she says, no matter where you go, I will hunt you down. She's like, I'm almost 17 now. Imagine how good I'll be in a few years. And he says, if you ever come back here again, your life is forfeit. And then he, like, signs the paper. And he says, any more requests? And she says, why, yes, a ship. And then she knocks him out again and, like, goes to find Sam. And she's, like, digging through all this rubble. And she finds this, like, really big stone. And it won't move. It won't budge. And she's like, oh, my God. Like, is he under there? And then all of a sudden, she hears him go, I don't think that's going to make it move. And he's just, like, standing there, like, covered in dirt. And she, like, runs over and hugs him and says, if you ever tell anyone, I will gut you. So we go to the next story, which is The Assassin and the Healer. So Celaena...
I love this one.
Yes. I like Irene. So... The Assassin and the Healer. So Celaena is staying at this tavern called the White Pig, and it's disgusting. And we are introduced to Irene Towers. And Irene is, like, so interested because Celaena basically is, like, wandering around. She's, like, obviously is, like, beat up. Her face is all bruised. She keeps her hood on most of the time. Like, she just drinks and then, like, goes to her room. She's not here for a long time, and they know that, but, like, she's not, like, talking to anybody. Like, she's real, like, standoffish, but interesting. And Irene has been here, like, working in this tavern for a year, which was, like, longer than she ever planned on being here. And so basically she stays here because she doesn't have anywhere to go now, but she barely makes any money because the owner, Nolan, and then the other girl, Jessa, I think, like, they take almost all of her money from tips. Like, so she can't even leave this place now because she's barely making any money. And Celaena wonders, like, why does Irene stay in this place? Because she's also, like, equally interested in this girl. And this place is in, like, Melisande, I believe, because Celaena is actually on her way to the Red Desert. So her face is all bruised and swollen because Arobin had beat the crap out of her when she got back to Rifthold after the whole thing in Skulls Bay. And she thinks, like, it was worth it, but she is so angry. And, like, she just basically, every night, she picks fights with, like, the men down there. And she just hopes that people mess with her so that she can fight them. And she's being sent to the Red Desert to train with the Master of Assassins as a punishment. So she has to, like, leave actually the next morning to head out there. She knows she could run away, but then she also knows that Arobin will probably hunt her down, and she doesn't know what actually happened to Sam when they got back. And so in the bar tonight, it just feels really weird. And so Irene kind of wants to warn the girl, but then because she basically knows like Nolan has probably like set this up for like the guys to rob her tonight. But she knows like if she does, like Nolan will kick her out if he finds out. And she thinks about her mother because her mother would have warned this girl. Her mother was an actual healer who never even charged for her services. And her mother had been killed by the Ireland soldiers, even though by the time they came and found her mother and Irene, her mom didn't even have her powers anymore. And so, like, as she's, like, working at the bar, some man comes up and grabs her. And he's like, don't you want to come over to my table? Because the other girl, like, she goes with the men and, like, sits on their laps and stuff. And Irene's like, no, I'm working. Thank you. And she's like, God, I can't wait. Like 40 minutes and like I can close this place down for the night. Like, hurry up. And so Celaena's like just been sitting at the bar all night and she's pissed off because no one's tried to rob her. So she goes to her room and like she knows Sam would say like she's being stupid and reckless. But again, she's like, I don't even know where Sam is or like what even happened to him. Is he alive? And she thinks he'll probably be happy if I never come back. And he'll probably become the head of the assassin. So she goes to her room and she barricades it. And like, not because she's scared, but like, so she'll like know if somebody tries to come in. And she sits there for a minute and she's like, nah, I think I want to go fight somebody. So she heads back down. And so Irene is out in the alley. She's like cleaning up and she's like glad like there wasn't actually a fight. Like she can't believe no one tried to rob that girl. And she wonders like what her mother would think of her like working here and you know all that. And Irene really wants to be a healer. She also did have the healer magic, but she doesn't have them now, obviously. But right before her 18th birthday, she had left her cousins, which is where she had been living since her mother was killed. And she was headed to Antarctica, which is in the southern continent, which is where they do magic still. And she was headed to what they call the Torre Chesme, which is where they train healers. But she basically ran out of money when she got here and ended up stuck at the White Pig. So she's like cleaning up all the scraps for the night and she likes to leave the scraps out for like the homeless people, but she actually got in trouble for it once and like literally Nolan took out of her check. So she hears people coming and she thinks it's them because she's told them like you have to wait until like it's dark, like until late to get them or he'll find out, but it's not. It's like a bunch of the guys that had been in the bar waiting on like Celaena that never robbed her. So they're like about to attack Irene, but all of a sudden they start getting pulled into like the darkness. She sees like Celaena like grabbing them and she's like handling. So she like is like, okay, she got it or whatever. So then after she like kills them all, she like Celaena comes over to her and she's like, please don't kill me. And Celaena's like, okay, well then why would I have saved you? Like, why would I save you? And Irene looks at her and she's like, oh, you're bleeding. And Celaena's like, okay, like, I'm fine. Like, she's like, I know I'll be healed in like a week. And Irene says, like, she's like, oh, thanks, Silva, or whatever. And that surprises Celaena because she's like, oh, like, you know the gods or something like that. And Celaena asks, like, because she just keeps apologizing. Irene's like, oh, I'm so sorry. And Celaena's like, why do you keep apologizing for everything? And so Irene, like, shifts and she's like, I need to fix your arm. Like, let me heal it, like, or let me clean it and bandage it, or, like, you're going to get an infection. So Celaena finally agrees, and, like, they go inside, and when Celaena finally removes her hood, like, Irene is so shocked to see how young and beautiful she is. Like, she knew that she was probably close in age to her, but, like, she's just still shocked. And Celaena asks Irene, like, how did you end up here? So Irene kind of recounts her story. And Celaena says, like, if you're going to be miserable, you might as well, like, be miserable and be close to the Torre. Like, you might as well figure out a way to get there. And she tells, like, Irene's like, I don't have any money. And she's like, okay, steal it. And Irene's like, I don't want to be like everyone else. No, girl, just take it and go. Right. And Celaena's like, okay. So Celaena decides, like, I'm going to teach you some self-defense. And she's like, I don't even know why I'm teaching her, but, like, something, like, is calling her. So she takes her out in the alley, and she's like, you know, I'm going to teach you self-defense. And really what it is, again, if we remember from the last book, Celaena always wanted to be a healer also. And she never could because she's going to be queen. Or she was going to. So she, like, admires the fact that Irene wants to go to the Torre and train to be a healer. So she tells Irene, like, the one thing that you need to know is, like, if someone comes to attack you, they're going to try to, like, take you somewhere else. So you never let them move you to another location. You need to make as much noise as possible, and you need to fight them and make it so it's not worth their time to try and take you. And she said, if for any reason, like, they let go of you for a second, you need to run. And so she shows her, like, all I could see in my mind was, like, the Miss Wait a minute. I can't remember if you... I knew it! I knew she hadn't seen this. Okay, so all I can remember... So in Miss Congeniality, because the whole premise... Do you know the premise of Miss Congeniality?
Yeah.
Okay, so she's a cop. Okay, so the whole thing is like... So she teaches them like self-defense. And like, she does it like on her partner who like she kind of likes or whatever. But she like It's like a whole song like thing that she has to remember. But she like stomps on his foot, does something else, and then like kicks him in the groin or something like that. But that's all I could picture as like she was doing it. So Celaena teaches her how to like eye gouge. There's like an ear clap, a foot stomp, a throat punch, and then like you get them in the groin. And so at this point, like it's almost dawn, and like Celaena knows she has to get ready to go because like she has to go to the desert, and then Irene like has to be up at dawn basically to start working all over again. So she got no sleep that night. And she tells Irene, like, teach as many other women as you possibly can. Like, she wants everyone to have defense. And Celaena can tell, like, there's men coming. And she signals for Irene to go inside. And Irene's, like, watching out of the window. And she sees, like, Celaena start fighting them. But then someone sneaks in from behind and grabs her. And he drags her out to the alley. And he tells Celaena, like, drop the weapons or whatever. And she won't. And Irene's like, okay, so you're going to let me die? But then Irene decides to defend herself, and she does all the things and takes him down. And then she realizes that Celaena just made her do that. Like, she was like, she could have easily not done that. And she's like, why would you do that? And she's like, because you had it or whatever. And so she tells her, like, you know, you need to go wash your clothes, make sure no one sees them or whatever. So Irene goes to wash her clothes, and when she comes back into her room, she finds that Celaena has left the money she took from those men with a note. And it says, go wherever you need to go, basically. And she also left her this, like, ruby brooch that she was wearing. I can't speak. So Celaena leaves, and she goes to get on the ship to head to the Red Desert. So we jump to the assassin and the desert. So Celaena knows that this is punishment, even though she's like going to train with other assassins. It's still a punishment. And so, first of all, it's like a week trip on a boat. And then she has to walk like 2 miles in the desert. And then it also is like a 2-week walk. I don't know. It's a long trip to get there. Like, I don't know. I would have died. But it takes her like 3 weeks to get there. I would have quit. And so she goes in to meet with the master, who is known as the mute master because he does not speak. And like many of the people here take vows of silence. And he's a very tan man. He's like around 50. And her orders are basically that she has 1 month to win the mute master's approval and return home with a letter of his approval. And she can't use like any fake names while she's there or disguises. And if not, like she basically can't come back home. And he notices like her bruises and he looks like very displeased by it. And then he signals for like 4 men to just like attack her. So she defends herself, even though like all she could think about is like, dang, could I get some water first? Like she's dying of thirst. So after she like shows her like worth, basically, she notices a female with like this red armor and a helmet that's kind of shaped like a wolf's head. And the master looks pleased and he summons the girl over and she says that she's Ansel and she will be her roommate. And basically, Ansel has been here since she was 13, and she's 18 now. And Celaena's like, oh, good, like, give me all of your information, but I'm not going to tell you anything about myself. And she immediately is, like, competitive. She's like, I wonder if I'm better than her. Like, I'm like, Celaena, please, girl. So Ansel basically tells her, like, I've never even worked with the master. Like, it's so funny because we just read Air of Fire, and was it Air of Fire or... I feel like I cannot remember the names of these books.
I think so.
What was the one before that? I'm like, what are the Dame of the Throne of Glass books? Let's start there. I think it is Air of Fire, but I'm pretty sure. Throne of Glass series. It was Crown of Midnight before that. Okay, that makes sense. Oh yeah. So Air of Fire. Well, it's just funny because like the same thing with Maeve. Like, she thinks as soon as she gets to these places, like, she's just, like, immediately, like, going to, like, do her thing and get out of there. And, like, both times are like, no. Like, you have to work for it. It's just not that easy. So, like, yeah, Ansel basically is like, you know, I've been here for 5 years and I've never even worked with the master. So, like, good luck, basically. But Ansel tells her that her father sent her here because he's, like, Lord Briarcliff of the Flatlands. And he wants her to be useful. And, like... Celaena's like, I've never even heard of the Flatlands. And Ansel asks her, like, how many people have you killed since you're, like, so notorious or whatever? And she kind of asked her, like, what kind of, like, calling sign do you leave? And Celaena's like, I don't really leave any, like, sign that I was there, but Arabin basically makes sure, like, the word gets out that I'm, like, this major assassin so that, like, people hire us, basically. And she does admit, like, that her bruises came from Arabin, basically, because Ansel asked. And Ansel shows her to the baths. And there's, like, basically all throughout this place, like, there's places you have to be quiet. So, like, the bathhouse, you have to be quiet in there. And she's kind of worried because, like, she had to give all her, like, stuff to the people when she got there. And she's like, they're going to judge me for my expensive, delicate underwear. Like, girl. She's so funny. Like, I just love it. So she goes to the room, like, and Ansel's not there. And so she can barely even figure out which side is hers because Ansel's side of the room is so undecorated for her to be there for, like, 5 years. Everything is just so plain and monotonous. And, like, she thinks back home, like, Celaena is so colorful. Like, she loves nice things and, like, color and all that. And she just can't stop thinking about Sam. Like, what happened to him? Is he okay? Was he beaten? And she thinks about the night, like, when they got back to Arabin. Arabin had been calmly furious. And Sam basically had tried to lie, saying, like, it wasn't her fault, but Arabin already knew that this was all Celaena's plan. And he'd basically called in some other assassins and had Sam held down. And so originally she thought that he was going to make her watch as they beat on Sam. And that's not what happened. He beat her and made Sam watch. So the next day, Ansel shows her, like, around their Assassin's Keep or whatever they call it there. And Celaena is, like, at first she's kind of afraid to eat. And Ansel's like, oh, like, the food's fine. Lord Beric doesn't, like, try to poison us. And she's like, who is Lord Beric? So basically, Lord Beric, like, lives in, like, a nearby city. And he works with the King of Adarlan. And basically, like, him and obviously the Master don't get along. So he tries to, like, do these, like, attacks on their, like, place, like, every so often. And he never, like, is successful or whatever. And so Ansel says she actually goes to see Lord Beric from time to time as, like, I don't know what they called that. An emissary? I think that's what they're called. Something like that. Where they, like, she, like, goes and tries to, like, broker deals with him, but, like, they've never been successful at it. And she tells Celaena, like, people come here and bid for the Assassin's Tier for, like, short missions or for sometimes permanent employment to work in another court. And she introduces Celaena to Mikhail, which I just put down as Michael the whole time because I don't know. I did not read the physical book, and I don't know how they spell that, but I assumed it was Michael, just pronounced Mikhail. I don't know. So Mikhail is also, like, another assassin there. And she also notices, like, another young boy who seems to be one of the silent ones, and she thinks, like, he looks to be very desirable almost as much as Sam. And then she's like, Sam? Wait a minute. She's like, when did I start thinking Sam was desirable? Like, she's like, what is wrong with me? And Ansel notices her looking at the boy, and she's like, oh, that's Ilias, the Master's son. And she says, he never pays attention to girls, though, but maybe he's into blondes. And Celaena's like, well, I'm not here for that, so I don't really care. And Ansel says, well, I'm sure you have a flock of suitors back home, which kind of offends her. And she's like, no, I do not. And Ansel says, you're lying. And Celaena just thinks, like, it's not that I'm not interested in men. And she's like, I've had infatuations before, like Archer, which we remember Archer. And also Ben, the trainer, who was just killed at the beginning of this book. So Mikhail asks, did you deserve to get the beating that you got? And she says, I guess it depends on who tells the story. And she's like, I guess if you ask Arabin, if Arabin tells the story, then you would think yes. If I tell you the story, you're not going to agree with him. And they're like, oh, wow, like, that's pretty terrible. So she goes to training, which sounds absolutely miserable. They have to run 3 miles in the desert, but they have to carry, like, basically that, like, rod across their back with, like, the buckets on the end is what I was picturing.
Yeah.
And so if you've ever run on sand, like the beach, like
it's near impossible.
Yeah, like I can't run a mile like on regular flat nothing. So I would never make it. And like, cause she's like pissed. She's like, first of all, I'm not even training with the Master. And Ansel's like, you're not going to train with him until you prove that you're worthy to train with him. And so she like is trying not to panic because she's like, I only have a month. Like, what the hell? So she starts running and she's carrying these buckets and she's like, this is impossibly hard. And she starts like, she's running and the other ones are already passing her on their way back because they're running to like this oasis in the desert and people are already coming back and she's not even made it there. And like she finally like she does it. She completes the whole thing and Ansel's like, don't feel bad. Like my first day, I didn't even finish it. Like Ilias had to carry me back. And so they're at like dinner that night and she sees the Master and he gets up and leaves. So she follows him. This is so funny to me. She also notices that Ansel and Mikhail hold hands, so like they're a thing. And so she goes up to the master and she's like, I wonder if he prefers me to be mute. But then she tries to like speak to him in gestures, and I'm like, I don't know. That kind of seems more rude than just talking to him. Like, I don't know. Like, if I went up to a deaf person and I don't know how to do sign language, but I just start making signs at you, like, would that not be considered rude? I don't know. I think like,
and
especially because he's not deaf. Yeah,
he's
like
mute, not deaf.
He's not deaf. Like, he can understand you. Like, I feel like making signs at you is so rude. I don't know. Like, that's just me. Right. But I was like, I think speaking would have been better. I don't know. But essentially, he tells her no, like, you need to wait your time, basically. But, like, in a nice way. Like, he's a really nice man. So she's annoyed, and she's like, okay, whatever. So as she's, like, standing there, like, her dad walks away, and Ilias comes up and, like, grabs her, and she's like, no, like, I'm not gonna hurt your dad. Like, it's whatever. So she, like, officially introduces herself, like, hi, I'm Celaena. And he tries to tell her something through hand signs, and this is why it's also funny, because she's like, I'm sorry, I don't understand you. Why did you think that then the master was going to understand you? Like, why did you think that someone was going to understand your hand signs? I don't get it. And so he just, like, walks away, like, defeated. So she asks Ansel later about, like, her relationship. And basically, Ansel and Mikhail have been together for 3 years. However, he is much older than her. And, like, so she's 18, which means they've been together since she was 15. But when she was 15, he was already an adult. So there's that. Also, he's, like, one of the trainers. So there's, like, some quid pro quo stuff there. But, you know. So Ansel says, like, tells her more about her home. And so she's from the Flatlands, which is by the Wastelands. And in the Flatlands, they get married as early as 14, which discuss Celaena. Yeah. And that makes her think about Sam again for a moment. And she's like, why am I so attached to him? Like, what is this? And she's also wondering, like, why did Arabin, like, assume that he needed 3 assassins to hold him down when he was watching me be beaten? So she, like, improves in her training over the next several days, and she thinks about how different they are here because, like, they were always taught at home, like, that they were competitors. They were not companions. But here they all work together. And she just knows, like, she's like, I'm going to get my letter, even if I have to hold a knife to him to get it. So on her 5th night there, Lord Beric does attack, and many of the assassins happen to be away that night, and so they're wondering, like, how did he know to attack this night? But they see, like, 30 men approaching, and Ansel says, like, we don't kill them, we just send a message. So they dip, like, these arrows in oil, and they just shoot, like, a wall of fire at them. So that's pretty cool. And then Ansel gets an order that she needs to go make a trip to the city. And the city is where Lord Beric is. That's where she's going. And it's 2 days away, and she asks Celaena to come with her. So they go, and Celaena she is so annoyed. She's like, it's sand in all of my parts, which I agree. And, like, it's so funny because Ansel says, like, I just can't believe, like, you're really an assassin. Like, you can't possibly be this whiny. Like, it's so funny. So she asks, like, Ansel about her lands because essentially, like, the wastelands, which we learned about the waste in the last book, that is where the witches are from. And it's supposedly cursed. But, like, Ansel talks about it like it's so beautiful. And basically, like, she says the land was beautiful until the Iron Teeth witches ruined it. And she explains there's Iron Teeth witches and then there's the Krakens. And that the Krakens are beautiful. And then the Iron Teeth are not always beautiful. And they have iron teeth. And she says that the day that the last Kraken witch died, she cursed the land so that nothing would grow and that all the crops died. And she says, but actually, ever since the witches left, because they don't have any crops or anything there, that the land has started to be fertile again. And she tells, because Celaena's like, have you ever seen a witch? And she says, yes. She says, when I was 8, I was with my sister and a friend, and there was, like, a rumor about this tower, and if you, like, look through at a certain time of the year, blah, 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 you could see into another world. So she's like, we went there, I got scared, so I stayed outside. They went up there, and then all of a sudden I heard a bunch of screaming, and her sister came out running, and basically said there was, like, an old hag with iron teeth, and they ran and got her dad, and, like, him and some men went back, but they never found the witch or the other girl. They just found a bunch of bones of a child that were, like, white and picked clean. So, and she also says that the only way to kill a witch is to cut off their head. So they finally make it to the city, and Ansel tells her, like, well, I'll be a few hours talking to Lord Beric, like, and no, you can't come. So she's like, okay, then why the hell did you invite me? Like, why did you brought me to sit out here? Like, okay. So she's like, well, I'll do my favorite thing. I'll go shopping. But she's also pissed because she's like, if I knew that, I would have brought more money. So she's, like, shopping, and she sees spider silk. And she meets the man that's selling it. So he tells her all about the spiders, and he tells her where you can find them. And she asks, like, how old he is, because he looks like he's about 40, and he says 25. So essentially, he bartered some of his life, but the spider didn't tell him what end of his life he would be losing. Like, he's thinking he's going to die early, versus they took some of his youth. And he says the only way that he could get his youth back, or those years back, is if the spider he traded with dies. And he asked her, like, are you a spy for Lord Beric? And she's like, what? And he says, like, he basically knows she's an assassin because she's, like, an unguarded female in the city. And he says that he knows that, like, the assassins come and have these meetings with Lord Beric, and he's basically heard that there's some weird things around these, like, meetings or whatever. And she's like, okay, so you think the assassins are spies? So the man offers, like, I can make you rich. And she's like, no, like, I'm good or whatever. So he gives her a small piece of the silk, and he just says, this is just a reminder that everything has a price. So she asks Ansel about her meeting when she comes out, and Ansel's like, it's none of your business, like, whatever, let's go. So Ansel takes her to these stables with these Asterian horses, which we'll remember, Chaol got an Asterian horse. And these are, like, the most ancient, like, most prized horses. And basically Lord Beric just got them, and he's going to be testing them out in an hour, but basically after that, he'll either give them away or, like, they'll just kind of rot away in the stables. So Ansel decides that we're going to steal them. So they get on these horses, and they are being chased by these guards, and they ride through the desert, through this place, and they ride all the way to this, like, ridge, basically, and their only choice is to, like, jump across it. And Celaena is pissed. Like, she's like, oh my god, like, I'm gonna die out here. But they, like, are able to make the jump because they have these horses, and, like, the other guards cannot. And when they get across, she punches Ansel in the face. And Ansel just, like, laughs. So that night, they actually spend the night in the desert, and she's, like, telling Ansel about the stars, and she shows her the stag, aka the Lord in the North, and she tells Ansel, like, what his significance is, and how, like, he's considered, the Lord in the North to the people of Terrasen, and how, like, it's basically a reminder that he's always with them, and, like, that Terrasen's always with them, and a reminder of where home is. So Ansel tells her that she lied about her father. She says, my father did not send me. She said her father was a lord, but he had that taken from him, and that her father and her sister were actually killed, basically when all this stuff with Otterland and everything happened. She said she saw them coming, and she hid in a cabinet, but her sister and her dad were dragged into the kitchen, and her father was made watch while her sister was killed, and then they killed her father, and then she ran. And she made it to a camp with an Iron-Teeth witch who decided not to kill her, but told her to go to the Assassin's Keep and gave her money, and so that one day she can go back and get her revenge, basically. And all that she has left of her father is the sword that she carries around. So when they get back, Mikhail and, like, the other assassins are waiting for them because they've heard the news about these horses. And they're, like, brought in front of the master, and they're, like, kneeling in front of him, and she can finally remember, because she's been trying to remember, like, what was Sam yelling when they were holding him down? And she finally remembers is, like, he was saying that he was going to kill Erebin when they were beating Celaena. And so she tells the master that it was her idea to steal the horses because she knows that Ansel's here with a purpose, and she doesn't want her to mess that up for herself. And the master actually seems pleased by this. And Ansel says, like, as our punishment, can we just be put on, like, stable duty, which they agree. And afterwards, he gives Ansel a message, and it's that Celaena is to report to him tomorrow for training. So it actually worked. So she finds him on a rooftop for her lesson, and he instructs her to open this basket, which has a snake in it. And she's like, what? And he basically wants her to, like, learn how to be like the snake. And he does that for all the lessons. It's, like, different animals, like crabs and, like, just different kind of animals. And so during the rest of her training, like, she doesn't really have time to spend with, like, Ansel and the other people. So on Ansel's birthday, she's, like, spending time with her. She's doing her makeup, and it also happens to be the Midsummer Festival. And she's kind of sad because she's got, like, 5 days left, I think, or she's got, like, a little bit of time left. And she's still, like, thinking about Sam, worried about him. She hadn't looked for Sam, like, right after she was beaten and all that, because it had taken her 2 days to really wake up. And afterwards, she had, like, went out and bought her own apartment because she was just so pissed. And she hasn't told Erebin that she's moving out yet, but she plans to. She still owes Erebin money, but there's no rule that she has to live with him, and if he ever put his hands on her again, or Sam, then he's going to lose his hand. So that night at the festival, she dances with Ilias, and she wonders, like, what he would say if he found out that she'd never been kissed. So when he goes to kiss her, she pulls back, because even though she wants to do it, she thinks like it's silly because she's leaving soon and she doesn't want it to be with him. So he just smiles and goes to his room. And the truth is that she doesn't kiss him because all she could think about was Sam. So that night, Ansel doesn't come back to the room. And so she sees her the next morning cleaning up the stables. And Ansel's like, I don't want to hear it. I've already been teased about it. And Celaena says, well, Mikhail, like, must get teased too. And she's like, no, he doesn't. He gets congratulated for, like, a good job, like, a conquest. And she says, so even with that, like, you still want to be with him? And she says, he's an amazing trainer and he gives me extra attention when we train. And some of us can't get special training with the master. And then, like, Ansel just starts snapping at her, basically saying that, you know, I know you think I'm not, like, good enough to get trained by the master. And, like, that's why I even started dealing with Mikhail, because I needed extra training. And Celaena kind of, like, snaps back at her and says, like, you know, she's like, the truth of it is, like, is no one even cares about the Flatlands. And no one's going to care if you go back and take them because it doesn't matter to anybody but you. And Ansel calls her, like, just spoiled and selfish and just, like, storms off. So she goes to train with the master that evening, and he, like, knows something's up, and he asks, like, he basically, in his own way, asks what's bothering her. And they're, like, I find this funny, because they're sitting on the parapet, and I was like, a parapet. And she just tells him, like, I'm scared to go home because everything is going to be different. And basically everything has been different since Skull's Bay. But she's not even sure she wants it to go back to the way it was before. It's just the fact that it's different now. So the next day, Ansel apologizes after, like, Celaena basically sleeps all day. She's, like, trying to, like, get over things. But Ansel apologizes, and she only has 5 days left. And Ansel just, like, she seems so weird. She comes in and she offers her wine, but she just keeps, like, looking at the door. And as Celaena drinks the wine, she can taste that something's off, and she collapses. And the next thing that she knows, she wakes up in the desert with her horse and all of her stuff except for her sword. And she reaches in her pockets and she finds a scroll and it says, I'm sorry it had to end this way. Basically, like, the master didn't want to embarrass you by asking you to leave early, so he told me to let you go like this. And it says, the horse is yours and here's your letter of approval. Go home. I will miss you. And she's like, why would I be getting sent home early? Like, what did I do? And she wants to read the letter of approval, but it's sealed. And so obviously if she breaks it, like, Arobyn's not going to take it. So she decides to just start heading north, and she goes back to, like, that city that they went to, and she passes Lord Beric's men heading toward the Assassin's Keep, and she's like, should I warn them? But then she's like, well, maybe that's why they got rid of me, because they knew they were coming. So she keeps going on, and all she can think about is, why would the master never agree to train Ansel? So she opens the letter, and it's blank. So she realizes how easy it is to steal or fake a signature, because she stole Rolf's signature and his seal, like his signet ring or whatever. And she realizes that Ansel has been a double agent this whole time. So she goes back, and the assassins are, like, dead everywhere. And Lord Beric's men had, like, gotten inside, and she assumes that they have been let in. And she wonders where the master is because, like, also, like, the main thing that Lord Beric wants is the master's head. So she finds Ilias down, like, bleeding from a stomach wound, and he points to the next room where she sees the master, like, laying very still because he's been poisoned. And Ansel is in there, and she's like tweaking out. She's, like, talking to herself, and she goes to cut off his head, and Celaena throws a dagger, and it hits her, like, right in the arm. And all she asks is why. And Ansel says, because Lord Beric promised me 1,000 men to march into the wastelands. And she says the horses were the perfect display to give him a reason to attack. She says, all I had to do was take care of the guards, leave the gates open, and bring him the master's head. And Celaena tells Ansel to go to hell, and she says, I've been to hell. And Ansel says, just look away, Celaena. And she says, if you touch him, she's like, basically, if you touch him, I will kill you. And Ansel says, I don't think you will. And Celaena tells Ansel, like, she knows what it's like to feel this hate in your heart, but it's not the way. And Ansel says, you're an assassin. And Celaena says, I became an assassin because I didn't have a choice, but you have a choice right now. And what she's really thinking is, like, please don't make me kill you. Like, I don't really want to kill you. Please don't make me kill you. But Ansel says, all these men do is destroy everything, and you know it, and you do nothing about it. Ansel says, you could come with me. We could conquer the Flatlands. And Celaena's like, I can't. And then, like, Ansel starts swiping at her, like, slicing at her, and they fight. And Ansel says, I tried to protect you, but you came back anyways. And she says, Celaena says, you call that protection? Like, dumping me in the desert and leaving me? And Ansel, like, is able to, like, get her down and get on top of her. And Celaena just tries to, like, keep her talking. And, like, Celaena, when she was passing all the assassins, saw that Mikhail was also dead. And she asked Ansel, like, who killed him? And she says, I did. And basically, like, he had figured out her plan. And then she says, like, the reason that Ilias is bleeding and stabbed is because he got in my way. And as Ansel's talking, Celaena can see, like, the master starting to, like, wiggle his finger. So, like, his poison's starting to wear off. And Celaena says, do you want to know what the master taught me in all those lessons? And she's like, this. And, like, she just, like, moves really fast, like the snakes. And she's able to, like, get an upper hand and get Ansel down with her knife. And Ansel immediately is like, please, no. Please, don't kill me. And I'm like, really? Like, right. So quick. And Celaena asked her, like, was any of this ever real? And Ansel says some of the moments were. And she's like, that letter and, like, everything I wrote in the desert, like, that was real. So they hear the assassins, like, cheer, and she knows that they've beaten down the attackers. And Celaena knows, like, if they find Ansel in here because she did all this, that they will kill her. So she tells Ansel, you have 5 minutes to pack your things, and you have 20 minutes to be gone, because in 20 minutes I'm going to go and fire an arrow, and I will not miss. And so she takes her dad's sword and leaves. And the master, like, drags himself over to Ilias, who's, like, bleeding out. And basically they had, like, laced the wine with Gloriella, which is like a paralytic, but it does not kill you. And after the 20 minutes, she goes and she can see Ansel, like, riding out on the horse, and she shoots the arrow, but it lands just short. But that's because Celaena had given her 1 extra minute, because if she hadn't, she would have hit Ansel. And so she goes back, and the master actually speaks, and she's like, oh my God, I thought you took a vow. And he's like, I don't remember ever taking a vow. Like, he's like, I think one day I just stopped talking, and then, like, some days I forget that I can actually talk. But he says, I'm glad that you did not kill Ansel. He says that I have been wondering when she would decide her fate. And so she's like, you have always known. And he says, yeah, like, basically he sent letters to her family about, like, the story she gave, and he never heard back. So he ended up sending someone to go look into it and found out that her family had died and that Ansel was considered missing, and that he hoped that one day that she would trust him enough to tell him the story herself. And he says that he thinks that she really did care about Celaena, and that you spared her, and she won't forget that. And he gives her her letter of approval, and he says, you will always have a home here, and I think my son would be very happy if you stayed. And he gives her 3 trunks of gold, and so she leaves. So we go to the assassin in the underworld, and she makes it back to her assassin's keep in Rithold. And she knows, like, with the gold that she has, she can settle her debt, and, like, she can tell Arobin that she's moving out. So she goes in, and she sees Arobin, and he's just, like, sitting at the desk. And he just, like, ignores her. She's, like, standing there. And he looks at her, and, like, the first thing he just says is, oh, I thought you'd be more tan. Okay. And he apologizes for beating her. And he gives her a box, and inside of it is an emerald and gold brooch. Brooch. Why can I say that? It's spelled like... Yeah. It's spelled like brooch, but it's brooch. I don't know. You guys know what I mean. Anyways. And the thing about Arobin is, like, he knows, like, she likes nice things or whatever, so he's, like, trying to buy her love. And she doesn't know why, but she just, like, cannot tell him that she wants to, like, pay off her debt and move out, so she doesn't tell him. And he tells her someone is coming to the capital that's going to be a target. His name is, like, Donoval. And basically they're trying to build a road to Melisande to, like, work on, like, the slave trade. And that his wife, Lifa, I think is how they say it, is the one that's, like, exposing him. Or, like, his ex-wife, because she doesn't like him. So that's his target or whatever. Or her target. And she wonders if this is, like, a peace offering. Because basically, like, what her target is to, like, take him out and then get these documents that would, like, prevent the slave trade. So she's like, oh, is this, like, a peace offering for Skulls Bay? And he tells her that the mission will pay really well and he won't take a cut of it. And she thinks, like, how many lives she can save as he, like, brushes her hair back and he's like, I missed you. And she, like, just kind of considers, because Arobin is all that she has, like, when it comes to family. And she just tells him she'll consider it, and she leaves. And she runs into Sam in the hall, and he looks perfectly fine. She, like, looks at him and, like, wonders, like, did you even get beaten? And she wonders, like, can I trust him after what just happened with Ansel? And he wants to know, like, about the cut on her neck, that Ansel had, like, basically cut her neck when she was holding her down. And she doesn't want to tell him. And then we meet Lysandra. Lysandra is a courtesan in training. And she comes out, and she's like, oh, Sam. And she's like Celaena's like number one enemy. Like she cannot stand Lysandra. She hates her guts. And her and Lysandra had met when she was 10. And Lysandra had been an orphan as well. And Sam basically tells Lysandra, like, go back to your luncheon, because basically Lysandra is going to be bid on for her virginity here soon, which is disgusting.
Yep.
And so they're celebrating the fact that she's like having her bidding or whatever. But Celaena's pissed because it looks like Lysandra and Sam have like had something going on or whatever. So she like leaves, goes to her room, and slams her door. And so when she wakes up later, she finds another gift from Arabin, which is like these 2 hair combs. And she like just looks at herself, her nails, her hair looks terrible. So she goes to like her local shop, and they're like so happy to see her. They fix our girl up. And then she goes to like this tailor because Arabin is getting this new assassin suit made for her. And it's got like hidden like booby traps, like it's like the blades like pop out of it and stuff, and it's got like these really nice boots that like go with it or whatever. And he kisses her head and he's like, I'm just glad to have you back. And when he leaves, she takes out that spider silk and asks the merchant if he can add it to it. And he's like, well, I could put it on the inside. And she's like, good, like put it over the heart. And Sam and Arabin are also going to have like similar suits. And when she sees Sam next, like she also like she has her suit on, and he's like, oh, like nice suit or whatever. And she almost like puts her hands on her hips, but she's like, wait, like I don't want to like slice anybody open, because she hasn't figured out how to like work the suit yet. And he asked her, like, how can you forgive him so easily and accept all his gifts? And she says, forgive him? Like, I'm not the one courting Lysandra. And Sam says, like, I don't enjoy it. And she tells him, well, like, don't judge me or whatever. And he says, you don't listen anyways. And Celaena says, you sound jealous. Like, what happened? You failed to make Arabin, or you failed to become Arabin's favorite in the 3 months that you had alone with him. And Sam snaps at her and he says, you know nothing of what this summer was like for me. Sam tells her, like, basically, you pretty much let him like see like what your price for forgiveness is, but you want to know what I told him my price was? I told him I would only forgive him if he never put his hands on you again. And so she walks off and she's like, I don't even want to speak to Sam like ever again. So they find out that like their target, Donovan, is going to be at the theater tonight. So she agrees to go with Arabin to the theater to like kind of spy on him. But she didn't know that Sam and Lysandra are also going to be coming. So Sam is coming as security, and Lysandra's coming because she needs publicity for her bidding. So they go, and she still hasn't found the courage to tell Arabin that she's planning on leaving. So they get there, and Arabin points out her target, and he has like guards with him, so they're like scoping that out. But as the lights dim, Sam reaches out and touches her hand, and he tells her how beautiful she looks. And like the music is so beautiful, like she literally cries. And Lysandra like starts picking on her, but Sam tells her to shut up. And like that night, like they all go to party, but she like doesn't really feel it. So she goes to play the piano, and she's trying to like play the songs from the night, but she just can't get it right. And she runs into Sam, and he's like, just can't get it right, can you? Like it just doesn't feel the same. And she's like, I can't be the best of everything. It wouldn't be fair to everyone else. And he asks her like, why didn't you chase after Donovan after the theater? And she's like, well, she's like, she didn't really know that he knew about the mission. And she asked him, like, why are you helping Lysandra? And he says, she's really not that bad when she's away from everybody else. And like us, she didn't choose this path for herself. And he says, you know, she really just wants you to, like, acknowledge her existence. And she's like, okay, so why are you helping her? And he says, because I was told to, and I don't want to get my face beat in again. And so she's shocked because she learns that he did actually get beat as well. And Sam says yes. And also, his punishment was making me watch you be beat. And Celaena says, why? And he says, after Skull's Bay, you know why. And she asks, like, are you going to bed with Lysandra? She asked him, are you going to bid for Lysandra? And he's like, bid? Like, I don't have any money. And he's like, whatever money I do have, I have to pay off my debt. And Celaena asks, like, well, would you want to? And he says, why? Are you afraid that we had a summer romance? And Celaena says, you know what? I hope you did, because I had a good summer too. And she lies and says that she was with Ilias, the master's son. And that pisses Sam off. And he says, you know, I missed you this summer. And she says, I missed you too. So she's on this roof because she's been, like, scoping out Donovan. She's been up there for, like, 6 hours. And I'm like, I'm not going to stake out. And Sam comes and she admits that, like, okay, like nothing really happened with Ilias. Like, I was just trying to make you mad. And he admits that nothing happened with Lysandra. And like the city is weird because it's been raining a bunch and they're basically getting ready to like flush the sewers out, which is disgusting. So they're kind of like glad it's raining and they're like filling up the sewers with water. So her and Sam leave because they really didn't learn anything today. And like this time she gets another gift from Arabin and it's like a robe. And Sam brings her a gift, though. It's the sheet music from the show where, like, she really loved the music. So this night she goes to a festival. It's like the Harvest Moon Festival. And she goes with Arabin, and then Sam's there as well. And Arabin always introduces her as his niece, and her name is Diana this time. And she sees her target, and he's with, like, a young girl. And honestly, like, she's not even surprised that he's involved in the slave trade. Like, he's disgusting. And he's also, like, with all these girls at a party that's, like, being thrown by, like, his former wife or whatever. So, whatever. Like, it's just, like, ugh. And she tells Sam, like, you know, don't follow me. I'm going to go and try something. And she goes to talk to Donovan. And he immediately is looking at her because she got, like, a low-cut dress on. And she's like, oh, like, I'm such a fan of yours. Like, I would love to meet with you. My name is Diana. And she's like, can we get together, like, in the next 3 days? And they agree to do tea. And then she's like, oh, like, maybe you could come to the theater with us and sit in our box and we could pick you up. And he's like, yeah, like, let's do 3 days. And you could pick me up at 8:30 because I have a meeting before. And she's like, oh, okay, like, the meeting's at 7:30. Like, clocked it. Okay, good. So she's, like, so happy. So she's like, okay, business is over. Let's dance. So she, like, dances her little heart out. And it gets so late. Like, it's, like, 3 o'clock in the morning. The old people are gone. And she notices these young guys on the stairs. And the one in the front with the dark hair seems to be the leader. And I was like, hello, Prince Dorian. Yes. And Prince Dorian, we don't get his name in this, but it's Prince Dorian. Because he comes up to her and he has beautiful sapphire eyes and dark hair. Like, this is Prince Dorian. And he wraps his arm around her and he's like, what's your name? And she's like, wind and bone and dust and half-forgotten song. And she's like, I have no name. And he says, well, then let me call you mine for a dance or two. And I'm like, swoon. And then Sam comes over, like, Sam, get out of here. Sam comes over and, like, he's like, no, she's spoken for. And Sam's like, you're drunk. And he's like, let me take you home. And she's like, no. And she's like, also, don't you have Lysandra or, like, somebody else for hire to be with? And he's like, I don't want to be with anyone for hire. And she tells Sam, like, well, he's like, we need to talk. And she's like, I don't want to talk to you right now. Like, maybe tomorrow. And she's like, I don't know how to be your friend right now. Like, I don't know. And he's like, you know what? Just go have fun. Like, whatever. So she, like, that's the rest of her night. So she goes to her, like, new apartment. She hasn't been back there yet because she still hasn't figured out how to tell Arabin, but it's, like, hidden away, like, in a place you would never expect it. And she's just, like, admiring it, and she does want to be there. So she goes to, like, training, and she wants to thank Sam for the music because she hasn't had a chance to, but she doesn't want to do it, like, in front of people. But she, like, cannot help but notice, like, he's shirtless, and Sam looks good, and she's like, oh my God. Okay, whatever. So she asks, like, you know, do you want to come help me gather more intel on Donovan? But he's like, I can't. Like, Lysandra has, like, she has a practice for her bidding or whatever. And she's like, okay, fine, whatever. Never mind. And then Lysandra comes in and she's, like, flirting with Sam again. And she just says, like, tell Sam to go. She's like, I have work to do. And she's like, I don't get better by lying on my back all day, like, throwing it at Lysandra. So she sneaks into Donovan's house, like, while he's gone. And she's trying to find the documents so, like, she knows what to look for on the actual night. And she sneaks in the window and immediately gets attacked by guards. And they're like, she takes out a few of them, but they drug her. And then she wakes up in the sewer. And they're like, we have noticed you and your friends spying on us for days. Like, you're not slick or whatever. So the house has, like, stairs that lead directly down into the sewer. And she's like, if you're not going to torture me, like, just go ahead and get it over with. So he's like, okay, enjoy your swim. And so they, like, leave her, and the water is rising, and she's disgusted, as I would be. This would be my worst nightmare, because what is in that water? And so she, like, is, like, finally able to, like, flip her wrist and, like, get the blade to, like, cut her bindings. But she's, like, rats and stuff are, like, in the water. I would be sick. And so she's able to, like, so she goes to the door to the house, and obviously it's locked. So then she, like, notices, like, there's, like, a little tunnel. She makes it all the way there, and she sees a light, so she's like, okay, good. So she gets all the way to this, like, grate, and it will not open. And, like, everyone's off the streets because they're like, all know that they're going to flood the sewer. So she just starts screaming. And then she luckily hears Sam, and he's like, I've been looking for you for 20 minutes. And he basically, like, had heard the guards kind of, like, joking that, like, they had done something. So they're both, like, pulling, pushing. He, like, tries a knife. Like, this grate will not budge. And it doesn't look like she's going to get out. And she's like, I never thought that I would die by drowning, but it's kind of fit because a river tried to take me out almost, like, 9 years ago or whatever. And so she just says, like, take my body home to Terracin, and she goes under the water. So the next thing she knows, he's, like, basically doing CPR on her chest, telling her to breathe. And she basically goes home and takes 700 baths, and she eats so that she can like throw up, and she just like is trying to get herself together, and she's like, I am never going to feel clean again. And same. And Sam comes to her room, and she's just like annoyed because she's like, how can I say I'm the best and I needed Sam to save me? And he tells her, like, are you good now? Because, like, you used all the hot water. And she's like, you're not going to shame me for that. Like, it was disgusting. She says, I'm surprised you didn't let me die. Like, I'm surprised you weren't dancing in front of the grate, like, laughing at me. And he's like, no one deserves to die like that, not even you. And he's like, also, I thought we were past that. And she says, I'm sorry for involving you in Skulls Bay. And she tells him, like, the truth about the scar from Ansel and the whole story. And she says, our mission just got a little more complicated because Philip, the guy that, like, basically tied her up down there, she's like, I'm about to kill him too. So the next day she goes to Arabin, she gives him the trunks, and she says, I'm pretty sure this covers my debt and then some. And she says, I'd like to keep working with you, but you don't own me anymore. And he says, well, can you blame me for not hoping this day would never come? But he doesn't look upset. So she decides, I'm not going to tell him about the apartment just yet. I'm not going to move out just yet. And he says, I would be willing to work with you too. And he asks where the money came from, and she says from the mute master. And he tells her, good luck tomorrow. Let me know if you need anything. And she's like, well, as long as you don't charge me. And he's like, hurt. And he's like, I would never.
Right.
Like, okay, you were just charging me, so I'm confused. And so her and Sam, like, they creep back through the sewer to find their way back to the house. So the plan is basically, like, when one of the servants come out to dump trash, one of them is going to sneak inside to the cellar so that they can get inside. And he tells her, like, I heard that you, like, paid off your debt this morning. How does it feel to be free? And she's like, not as I thought it would. And he says, like, I'm surprised Arabin didn't fight you. He says, I think I'm going to leave. I think I'm going to go to Ilway. And he's like, there's nothing left for me here. And Arabin says, like, maybe we can, like, look into getting in the South. And he's like, as long as I'm here, I'm just going to be your alternate. And he tells her he's leaving in 2 weeks, and she's like, you can't go. She says, what was the point of Skulls Bay and giving me that sheet music and telling Arabin you wouldn't forgive him if he touched me again? And he said, I thought you didn't care. And she says, I was lying, you stupid bastard. And he says, I spent the entire summer trying to talk myself out of slitting his throat, and he knew I wanted to kill him. He says he knew I wouldn't do it because I wanted to make sure that you came home safely. So he wouldn't send me on any missions. He made me help Lysandra and do little stupid stuff. Not only did he want, he was like, not only did I want you to come back in one piece, I wanted you to come back and take revenge, but you didn't. And he's like, now that you're free, I definitely can't stay here. And she says, like, what can I say to you to, like, make you to stay? Like, what do I need to beg? And he's like, no. And she says, why can't you let it go? And he says, he starts shaking her. And he's like, because I love you and I have for years, and he knows it. And he's like, if I ask you to choose, you'll choose him. And she tells Sam, she says, you're a damn idiot. And she says, because I pick you, and she kisses him. And for whatever reason, they stay down in the sewer for a very long time making out because they could have left and went anywhere.
Great spot to do it.
Yeah, like, love, different location. Mm-hmm. You have a whole apartment. Go there. Right. Because I don't want to be down there.
Not in a stinky, dirty...
That you almost died in. Like, I don't want to be down there. So, like, and then they go back to, like, their, like, house or whatever, and they, like, spend the night, like, making out. So the next day is, like, the actual day. So they go, and, like, she's the one that sneaks in when the servant comes in and takes the trash out. And basically, like, Sam's gonna bring in, like, torches and, like, set off a bomb, basically, for, like, a distraction. So she sneaks up into the study, and she, like, looks around, and she finds, like, a loose floorboard, and, like, finds these plans about smuggling slaves and, like, getting them to freedom. And basically, she thinks that Donoval's going to turn these in to the king so that, like, these rebels get caught. So then she hears voices, so she hides in the armoire, and then Donoval comes in with, like, another man, and she doesn't give them much time before she just, like, jumps out, basically. And she instantly kills Donoval, so the man, like, runs, and he gets out. And then Sam, like, sets off this, like, bomb or whatever, so, like, the house is on fire. And she immediately runs into Philip, the guard that tried to kill her. So, like, she, like, stabs him in the stomach. And he's like, you do not know what you've just done. And he's like, did Lifa hire you? And he says, Donoval loved his country. You don't know anything. And she's like, I don't really care. Whatever. And she goes to chase after the other man. And she corners him. But before she can get him, he pulls out the papers he had, burns them, and then swallows a poison and kills himself. And she goes to look at the papers he had, and she sees it, like, basically the same ones that she saw that Donoval had, but they were for Adderlin, and they're, like, slave, like, hideouts, basically. And she's like, why would he kill himself over this? And she, like, feels like she doesn't know anything, actually, like Philip said. And she's like, what does Arabin know? But she goes ahead and burns the rest of the papers so that nobody gets them. So she goes back and she finds Sam slumped in an alley, and he's actually fine. He had got shot directly in the heart, but the armor saved him because she put the spider silk in his suit. So she goes to Arabin, and he says, I've never seen you make such a mess before, like setting the fire. And she's like, I mean, well, it's a good cover. Like, nobody will ask what happened to Donovan. And she says, yeah, but there's also no identifiable body. And he's like, you're not going to get paid for this because she wanted a body and 2 sets of documents, and all you have is 1 set of documents. And he laughs and he goes, you really haven't figured it out yet. He says, there was no trade agreement. The real meetings are in the castle between the king and Lifa. So this whole thing, Donovan was a rebel. He was the good guys. He was trying to free the slaves. Lifa is the one who went the road and to keep doing the slave trade with the king. And she just gave Lifa the papers to expose the rebels.
Yep.
And Arabin knew that. And she looks at him and she's like, is this punishment for Skulls Bay? And what actually happened, she's also pissed because she had just sold her horse, the Asterian horse, to Lifa, thinking that she was a good woman. And she goes, you know what? She takes the money and she gives it to him and she says, Sam's debt is now paid. And he goes, you know what? I don't really care because guess what I did with your money? He says, I spent all your money buying Lysandra last night. Okay, you're disgusting. And disgusting. She says, I'm moving out today. And she goes, why did you do it? And he says, why shouldn't I enjoy her? I spent all this money on her all these years investing in her. And from what I heard, you have Sam now. And she's like, of course he knows about me and Sam. And you know what? She's like, it hurts, but it doesn't hurt like it probably would have before. And she says, don't come looking for me for a long while because if you do, I might kill you. And he says, I look forward to the fight. So she leaves, and on her way out, she sees Lysandra lounging in this very barely covered nightgown or whatever. And she's like, oh, your gold went such a long way. And she literally just throws a dagger at her head, and Lysandra just starts screaming, and she just walks out pissed. And she wants revenge, but she's like, you know what? I'm just not. And so she starts having them bring her stuff over to her apartment. And Sam finds her, and he's just like, I'm so sorry. And she's like, no, I needed it. I needed him to do that so I could move out. And Sam has brought his stuff, and he's like, so we're really free. And she says, I would never leave you shackled to him while I'm free. And Sam says, I never want to be separated from you, even if it means going to hell itself. And we go to the last chapter. It's the assassin in the Empire, and we start with her shackled in a wagon. She just basically is numb. And we jump to 11 days earlier. So Celaena had been waiting on this night. It's the same, so the night she had in the theater with Arabin, it's been a whole year since then, basically. But this time, she's not actually in the theater in a box. She's, watching from the rooftops. She's come every year with Arabin, but now, obviously, he's with Lysandra now, and she's exiled, basically, almost, because she left. And it doesn't feel the same, so she goes home, and Sam's not there, and he left a note saying, don't wait up. So she knows exactly where he is. He's gone to the vaults, which is basically, the slums, the pits, where he is prize fighting for himself to win money. So she finds him down there, and she can tell he's kind of he's playing with his food. He's putting on a show because he could easily win this fight. And afterwards he wins, and she scolds him, and she's like, I don't want you fighting. But he's like, we need money. And basically they can't get any jobs as assassins because Arabin's basically making it so they can't get any jobs. And he's like, also, we need money because you like nice things. So, yeah. And he says, okay, well, let's just leave Rithold. Let's get out of here. But she's like, we need to do another contract before we leave. And also, she, smells him, and he's using her lavender soap. And she's like, are you using my soap? Use your soap. Don't use my nice soap. And so they still have not, it's been a year. They still have not slept together. They both want to, but they just haven't, done it yet. So they decide they're going to do one more job. And they need Arabin, so they go to see Arabin. And she tells him, we are going to leave the city, and we would also like to officially leave the guild. But we do want to do one final job. And he looks at Sam's split lip, which is not from her. It's from the vault. But he goes, lover's quarrel? And he's, just trying to avoid the fact of, everything Celaena just said. And Sam is trying not to speak because he's, immediately pissed off. And so he tells them, you're free to move away. Obviously not answering the full question of okay, can we leave and leave the guild? And Sam snaps, can you just answer the question? And he says, okay, he gives them some very ridiculous price. And Sam's like, are you crazy? And he says, you two are my best assassins. If you leave the guild, we don't just lose you, we lose our respect, basically. And Celaena's like, fine, we'll pay it. And Sam's like, you didn't even try to bargain. Like, they're like walking out. And she's like, is the issue that we're paying that amount of money, or is the issue that I'm going to pay it? And he says, the issue is that I'm tired of playing his games. And Sam says, when do we draw the line? And she says, this is the last time. And Sam just walks off because he's like, I got to clear my head. And Celaena feels responsible for Sam now, like ever since like Skulls Bay. And she just has this guilt. And like, that's why she pays for everything. And she looks up at the glass castle and she hates that thing. And Sam comes back later and he had found them a contract. And he's like, basically, the people don't want to use the guild. And she's like, why? And he's like, because they want us to take out the 2 biggest crime lords. And she's like, fine. So they agree. So they start collecting info on their targets. It's Farron and Jane. That's their names. And they're both guys. And Sam basically wants to keep her out of it as much as possible because the target are basically like these really sadistic killers who do like nasty, terrible, like torturing stuff. And he's also like, I found this job, like we're going to do it my way, like you stay out of it. She's like, we should really do this together. And he's like, I've had just as much training as you. Like, don't try to undermine me. Like, I'm a trained assassin. So she agrees. Basically, he's going to take care of Farron and then she'll take care of Jane. So he goes and like does his thing. She's like, I'm going to do my last little dance lesson. Like, I'm going to have to find like a new dance studio when I get there. And I was like, okay, Bryce Quinlan, whatever. And when she gets home, she finds Arabin sitting on her couch, who did not know, like, cause he asked them like, where are you living at? And they didn't tell him. So he's found out where they live. And he goes, why do you think it's a good idea to be doing this job? Because he's found out. And she said, it's none of your business. And she's already paid him his fee. So she's like, we're not in the guild anymore. Like, it's none of your business. And he says, even I wouldn't take on Jane. Like, you're not invincible. And she says, how could I even trust you? And she's like, get out of my house. And he asks, like, do you trust Sam? And he goes, have you told him the truth about where you really come from? Because that's probably something he would like to know. And she says, get out of my house. And he says, no matter what I've done, I really do love you. And he's never said that before. And she's also like, how are you saying that? Are you saying that like as a father, as a friend, like as a lover? Like, what are you trying to say to me? And he says, I'm afraid and I don't know how to express how I feel. And I'm mad that you picked Sam. Like, stay with me, like come home with me. And she's like, we are leaving. I'm leaving. And she's also like, he's had so many opportunities to say this. Like, don't try to weaponize me now, like saying that you love me. And so he leaves and she goes to meet Sam for dinner and she just doesn't really feel like talking. And she asks Sam, like, what is your deepest secret? And he says, like, the only secret he ever had was that he loved her. And so he asks her and she says, deep down, I am a coward and I'm scared all the time. And he says, I'm scared too. And whenever I get scared, I tell myself, my name is Sam Cortland and I will not be afraid. And I was like, Lahaba, my friends are with me and I am not afraid. Like, that's all I could think was like, Lahaba. I was like, oh, that is so much. So they're still working on this mission and they're like following one of the guys around. And she's annoyed because how dare this sadistic, torturous killer stop at a bookstore and buy books that are regular books that she actually also enjoys in her free time. Like, how dare you? But then also they go to the vault because this guy owns the vault and he goes inside and just like starts torturing somebody. And like her and Sam have a conversation about how they'll never be like him because they have a choice and they're not those kinds of like assassins or killers. So that night Sam gets dressed to like take care of his target and she's supposed to be packing. And she asks like, where are we going to go? And he says another continent. And she's like, continent? Like, you didn't say that. You said we were leaving like Otterley. You did not say we were leaving like the continent. Like, you didn't say that. And so he asked, like, is this about Arabin? Because, like, you don't want to leave the continent because then you'll officially, like, be gone from, like, Arabin. And is, like, that too far from him? And he's like, I know that he came by here yesterday. And he tells her, basically, Arabin used to try to bait Sam into, like, what Celaena's, like, backstory was and give him reasons to not like her. And he says, he will never leave us alone. And he says, I love you. And she says, I hate packing. Me too. You do.
Yeah.
So it's been 2 hours. She has done no packing and she's trying to stay occupied, but it's really past the time that Sam's supposed to be back. So she starts worrying. So she waits because she knows he would be pissed off if she came looking for him. But like too long goes by and she goes looking. And she's like just kind of like in the streets trying to like listen to people talking and she doesn't hear anybody saying anything. And she's like, maybe he wasn't like home. Like maybe the target wasn't home or whatever. So she goes back and she's like, I'm sure Sam will show up. So then it's like 1 o'clock in the morning and he's still not home. And she falls asleep. Then it's 4 o'clock in the morning and he's still not home. So then it's dawn. And so she goes and looks all over the city for him. Can't find him. So she's like, you know what? He'll be home when I get there. So she gets home and the door's open and she's like, oh my God, he's here. Like, how stupid am I? She runs up there and she finds Arabin inside. And she's like, immediately she knows. And he goes, I'm sorry. And she starts like throwing dishes around and he says they thought he still lived at the keep. So they left his body there. And she's like, I want to see his body. And he's like, no, Celaena, you don't. So she leaves and she immediately starts walking towards the keep. She goes in. Everybody's silent because everybody knows. And she goes down because she's like, you guys are messing with me. Like, he's not really here. It's a mistake. The wrong person. But she starts heading towards the mortuary room because that's where they're taking her. And she's like, no, like, this is not him. And she goes in there and he's like mutilated. Like, they took out his eyes. Like, he's all cut open. She just like vomits. And like, Sam is dead. He's dead. And she just won't leave him. She lays on the table, like holding him, and she's smelling him, and it smells like him, and also like her lavender soap. And she feels like an ass because she like was scolding him about using her freaking soap. But then it also doesn't smell like him. And like Arabin leaves and like gives her time, and she ends up falling asleep. And she wakes up back in like her old room, and she already feels like she's forgetting. Like she's like, was his eyes like poop brown or like dirt brown? Like, I don't know. Like, she's like, what color were his eyes? And she can hear like the assassins in the hallway, like they're planning a retaliation attack. So she pretends to be asleep, and Arabin comes in and like rubs her face, and then he leaves and he locks her in the room. And she knows that he doesn't want to let her go out and get revenge. So she gets up and her suit is gone. So she puts on whatever clothes are in there. She has no weapons. So she has to like uncover like her hidden weapons that she kept in her room. And she goes out the window. And so Wesley is another assassin there that she didn't like love, but he grabs her and he's like, what are you doing? Like, I know you want revenge. Like, don't you know it's just but she knocks him out. And she goes to the like place and she sees like an open window. She's like, I don't even care. She's not thinking straight. She literally just jumps in this window and it's a dark room full of people waiting for her. It was a trap. Mm-hmm. And she starts killing a bunch of guards. She kills Jane, so she does kill one of them. And like Farron is just sitting there smiling, and the guards have like these weird masks, and the room starts filling with smoke, and she goes down. And she wakes up hearing someone says like no one is to touch her, and Farron is like smiling down at her, and she didn't think like, she's like, okay, Arabin couldn't have betrayed her. Like, what is this? And so she was poisoned with the Gloriella, and it's the same poison they must have used on Sam. And like Farron tells her she's beautiful, and like he would love to keep her for himself instead of handing her over, but that's not part of the plan. And the plan was that they kill Sam, she'll go crazy and kill Jane, and then he can take Jane's spot. And he'll be giving her to the king. And she wants to know who betrayed her. And she thinks, wow, Wesley was trying to warn me, and I knocked him out. Like, I'm an idiot. Like, she literally was not thinking. And he like slaps her, and then like she wakes up again and she can move, so she knows it's been 6 hours because that's when it wears off. And she's in a dungeon and she's like, Sam is still dead. Arabin still has not rescued me. And a guard comes in and like brings her dinner, and she's like, there's nothing left to fight for. And she realizes she'll never be able to give Sam a proper burial. And she hears guards like talking about her, so she's gonna have like a trial basically. And they're wondering like, she can't really be the assassin. Like, maybe she's not really Celaena Sardothien. So they take her to the king, and they ask her how old she is, and she won't answer. And they're like, basically, if you don't speak, we'll take it as an admittance of guilt. And the king makes her look at him and says, do you have a final request? And she says, make it quick. And he says, absolutely not. And he says, you're guilty, and you are to serve 9 lives in Andover. And she is taken to the salt mines. So we go to Arabin, and he's standing with Farron because he's the one who sold her out. And Farron's like, you could free her, but he's not. And he asks Arabin, like, why did you do it? And Arabin says, because I don't like sharing my belongings. So she spends 2 days in the wagon, and it's actually like a 2-week trip there. And she knows that Andover is like a death camp. And one day she's like looking out the window and she sees a white stag, almost as like a beacon for her, because she knows it's like to represent the Lord in the north. And she starts crying because the men outside try to kill it, but it does get away. And she finally makes it to the camp, and she tells herself she will survive this, and she will not break, and she will find out who did this to her. And she says, my name is Celaena Sardothien, and I will not be afraid. The end.
The end.
Thoughts, ratings. What did you rate it?
4 stars.
Same.
I liked it. It wasn't as high of a 4-star as the other ones that I rated 4 stars, but it was still 4 stars. It wasn't like less than 4 stars for me.
Yeah, no. 4 stars is good. Yeah, what did you, like, think? Like, connections, forward, backwards?
I liked having the insight on the past and some things that are briefly brought up in the other books. But yeah, no.
Yeah. Any predictions with any of these people that we met in this book?
Not really.
Okay. You don't have to. Yeah. Sam. Thoughts on Sam?
I am heartbroken.
I know. I mean, we knew he was dead, so it's kind of like, you know that, but it's just like...
I didn't realize to the extent of...
It's kind of sad because it's kind of her fault, because it's like, he just wanted to leave, and she wouldn't.
And he was, like you said, mutilated, like, terribly.
Yeah. It's terrible. Yeah. It is sad, so, okay. Reviews?
Yes. So, 5-star, and all it says, it's one sentence, and it says, I don't want to talk about my feelings right now. I need a couple weeks to process this. 1 star. Okay, 1 star. Rating it 1 star because I randomly remembered that SJM killed Sam.
That's not even a fair 1 star. That is not fair. That's hilarious. Okay, so we'll be back in our order. I don't know what the next... I gotta go back. Last series order. Okay, I think the next book in this series is... Alright, the next book in the series is Queen of Shadows. But we won't be covering that until December, and we will be doing part 1 in December, and then sadly part 2 won't be covering until January, because with the holidays and stuff, the breakdown. But our next actual book for podcast is...
Big Chicas Don't Cry.
Yes. It's Annette Chavez Macias. I don't know if I said that right. Macias? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, I will be starting that today.
I just started it today.
But, yeah. So, excited for that. Yeah. So, I think that's everything that we have. All right. Anything else?
I think that's all.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.
Bye.
Bye.